Korea, the land of morning calm, to use its lovely ancient name. Today, an unhappy, war-devastated land, with 9 million of its population displaced from their homes, and 2 million of these are children under 18 years of age.
As the end of World War II dawned on the Asian theater, the Japanese would be forced to end hostilities through the signing of the Japanese Instrument of Surrender. This agreement would put an end to World War II and to 30 years of oppressive Japanese rule over the Korean people. However, many more years of Korean struggle were still to come. Deep divisions between the North and the South would lead to the devastating Korean War. This brutal war would kill over 5 million people, 10% of the country's population, and would leave South Korea in ruins. After the war, the industrious North would rapidly grow and develop, while the agrarian South would be faced with the hardships of poverty, famine, and corruption.
산에 가요 솔로몬비가 송기비끼 와가 그 송기산뭐 죽기를 먹고 보살 팔아가 아사가 죽기를 먹고 그때 그 시절에 진짜 곤란 많이 했거든 아들 캐할 때.
The next decade would be marked by a series of governmental catastrophes that would exacerbate problems within the country. During these 10 years, no government would manage to overcome the socio-economic barriers that stood in the way of the Korean Republic. Due to these barriers, South Korea would rank as the poorest country in the UN and be far outclassed by the Communist North during the 1950s. On May 16th, 1961, in a coup that would forever change the course of South Korea's history, Major General Park Chung-hee would lead 3,000 Korean soldiers to seize control of Seoul, the country's capital. Park would step up as leader general of the country and would form the Military Revolutionary Committee. This committee would act as the central governmental body, while Park stabilized the country. Over the next 2 decades, President Park would lead aggressive economic reforms. His plan would have to break countless economic and social barriers, but would make South Korea an international powerhouse. After 2 years in power, in 1963, Park Chung-hee would be democratically elected as president. Park would move forward by initiating his series of 5-year plans. Park aimed to accomplish 7 5-year plans. Each would help grow different parts of Korea's industry, society, and culture. However, the Korean government lacked the funds to support the plan, and the United States had stopped providing hundreds of millions of dollars in aid due to fears that President Park was a communist and resembled the Russian leader Joseph Stalin. It seemed as though Park's plans were a failure before they had ever begun. This was until West Germany would supply 140 million marks for a supply of Korean miners and nurses to come work in Germany. The aid provided by West Germany would act as a catalyst and allow him to initiate his first plan.
저희들 분푼이 보내는 것을 종합적으로 해가지고 참 그걸 갖다가 경제 발전 어느 곳에서보다 하는 거예요. 그때 정책 입안 정책을 하시던 분들이 참 뭔가 잘했다고 생각합니다.
During his first phase, Park would declare the city of Ulsan to be a specialized industrial development zone, which led to the setup of an oil refinery and an automobile production center. The first phase proved to be a major success, and by its end in 1967, the Koreans had achieved an average economic growth rate of 7.8%. The second phase of 5-year plans was aimed at introducing heavy industry. A focus was placed on steel and petrochemical manufacturing, and major highways were built across the country in order for faster transport. Working off the economic and industrial successes of his first 2 plans, President Park would start the 1970 New Village movement. The program was implemented in order to halt the growing disparity between the rapidly advancing urban areas of Korea and the underdeveloped agricultural communities. Rural Korean communities were still highly impoverished and uneducated, with little infrastructure for any form of upward mobility. The movement was based on the ideas of self-help and collaboration between the villagers and the government. Thousands of rural villages were given the resources to develop their infrastructure, such as cement and steel. The New Village movement greatly increased the development of rural Korea and introduced roads, bridges, irrigation systems, and other infrastructure.
Sima Longdong had only been using cement to build a road or a building or a bridge, it would not have led to higher incomes. This massive investment combined with mobilizing the local population to do a lot of things in their own villages together is the Sima Longdong. And one without the other would not.
The success of this initiative in the rural landscape inspired the urban areas to follow suit, resulting in a nationwide movement to modernize. President Park's New Village movement greatly lowered rates of poverty, illiteracy, and improved living conditions among agricultural communities in Korea, while simultaneously raising productivity and strengthening South Korea's economic base. However, due to the loss of military protection from the United States caused by the Nixon Doctrine, South Korea was left vulnerable to attacks from the Communist North. This required South Korea to develop their defense and military, which was done through a focus on developing heavy chemical industries, electronics, shipbuilding, machinery, petrochemicals, and non-ferrous metals. These advancements both improved Korea's military might and its competitiveness as a global manufacturer of technology as well as machinery. Although economic growth was still evident in the 1970s, it had begun to decelerate. Simultaneously, the popularity of President Park began to decline as more malignant aspects of his autocratic rule became apparent. The government of South Korea had become clearly totalitarian as soon as the Yushin Constitution was signed under President Park. The Yushin Constitution gave President Park unrivaled executive control over Korea and the ability to rule democratically forever. Under Park's rule, constitutional freedom of speech and press were often ignored, and his opponents were arrested and tortured, leading to many protests against him. Citizens who believed that the barriers of political corruption within the country were broken down saw them rebuilt as Park's policies became more restrictive. President Park would soon be assassinated by KCIA Director Kim Jae-gyu. President Chun Doo-hwan, who was signed in on September 1st of 1980, would continue Park's economic reforms. In 1982, an important economic shift would be made from chemical and heavy industries to technology-intensive production and exportation. During this time, precise machinery and electronics were in high demand on the global market, and consequently, Korea's exports would surpass $500 billion. In order to maintain the success of Korea's exports, the government, under strong democratic and respected leadership, attempted to remove any economic barriers on trade as part of a 5-year plan. With highly developed technological fields, Korea would begin to diminish direct assistance to sectors and increase training in research fields that pertain to all industries in order to diversify the economy.
기업을 이렇게 해서 잘 살게 하는 데 우리가 역할을 해야 된다는 사명감, 또 할 수 있다는 자신감, 또 이거는 어떠한 어려움이 있어도 해내고야 말겠다는 좀 도전적이신 것이다. 그 다음에 네 번째가 중요해요. 같이 잘 살아야 되겠다. 모든 그 기업의 구성원들이 다 잘 살고.
From 1991 to 1996, the final phase of Park's plans were implemented. This phase called for the development of high technology fields such as microelectronics, new materials, fine chemicals, bioengineering, optics, and aerospace. Advanced facilities for these fields would be built all across the country in order to evenly distribute industrial development geographically. By the end of Park's original plans in 1996, the GDP of Korea was over $630 billion. This economic growth was unprecedented. In less than half a century, South Korea had overcome various social and economic barriers to become one of the world's industrial hubs and a rising economic power. Now, with a market-oriented economic model, Korea is one of the world's top 15 economies. South Korea now has a GDP of over $1.6 trillion, ranks number 1 in education, and is a leader in technological as well as cultural innovation. The miracle on the Han River was given its name because, to the rest of the world, it was unknown how the world's poorest country could see such rapid development. But to the South Korean people, it was no miracle. The will of the people and the strong leadership of the government led South Korea's rapid development. The story of the miracle on the Han River is a story of how the people rose up to overcome the barriers of poverty, imperialism, and corruption to claim their spot on the world stage.